Hello, everybody, and welcome to our 2024 Graduate Policy Scholars Student Showcase. We're so happy to have all of you here with us. I know we'll have more people joining as we get underway, but I'll go ahead and kick things off since we have lots of folks who will be sharing today about their policy product work and the work that they've done in this program. My name is Stephanie Anderson. I'm the manager of the Clark Fox Policy Institute and an advisor in the Graduate Policy Scholars Program. My pronouns are she, her. And we're so happy to have you all with us today. Your microphones and cameras for our audience are disabled, but we'd love to hear from you in the chat. So please feel free to send us any chat messages that you have, questions for our presenters, or resources that you'd like to share with them that are related to these presentations. So we will also be broadcasting this live on YouTube and recording it. So there will be a recording available later. If you want to share this with others, you'll be able to do so. So I'm going to turn it over to our scholars now and let them get started. And I'll be passing this over to Grace, who will be kicking things off for us. And I just want to, before I turn it over to you, Grace, say that we're so impressed with all of the work and effort that these scholars have put into the program this year. And we're really excited for you to see the fruits of their labors and the products that they've created. And just hear more about the things that they have been working on. So we're excited for you to get a little glimpse into this program and the exceptional students that we have in our scholars in training.
Thanks, Stephanie. So I'm Grace. Use they, she pronouns. I'm going to be introducing our first presenter. Unfortunately, our first presenter wasn't able to be here in person, but was able to send us a video of the presentation. So this will be from Benjamin Seiler, who's an MSW student, and it is a policy brief titled Protecting Parental Rights in Missouri. Just going to share my screen.
Hi, everyone. This is Benjamin Seiler, and I'm excited to share with you my Graduate Policy Scholars policy product, which is a policy brief. And the title of my work is Protecting Parental Rights in Missouri. I do want to preface this presentation by saying the language and the tone of this policy product is very serious and it's very straightforward. And I did this purposefully because I'm going to be talking about a law that is currently in effect in Missouri, and Missouri legislature tends to fall more to the Republican control and more conservative values. And so I had to write this policy product that would appeal more to that population, because as you know, sometimes we have to change our language and change our approach to get our points across to populations that may not see it through the lens in which we see it. And so I just want to make that note really quick. But anyway, I want to share that the law that I am looking at is the SAVE Act of 2023, which is the Save Adolescents from Experimentation Act. And this act essentially bans gender-affirming care for minors in Missouri. And it also has a few other provisions that limit what clinicians and medical practitioners can do. Particularly, they can lose their license if they provide any services or order procedures that are deemed illegal under this law. And I know that might make some of you mad. It does make me mad. But I do want to share that my ask in this policy brief is to essentially not look at it as a whole ban on this population, but I want individual caregivers and legal guardians to allow consent for their minor or minors to receive this care. And basically, all I ask in this policy brief is that they provide written consent and that a licensed healthcare professional also testifies or provides an affidavit that says the child would benefit from this type of service and these procedures and care. So here I basically talk about the context and importance of this issue. I basically talk about how it is pretty much seen that gender affirming care is supportive, and that adolescents who have already pre-existing mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression or suicidal ideation and thoughts can benefit and improve their condition by receiving services such as hormone therapy, transition surgeries, and puberty blockers. But the takeaway here is that I want to get rid of the whole ban and say, just let the parents or caregivers decide. Basically, put the decision back in the hands of the parents like they would any other decision in regards to their child, such as education and other medical care. And so here I also put in a critique of the policy, basically looking at the other side, because it's good to look at both sides and include both perspectives and points. And so some of the points here are basically that no child has the right and no parent has a constitutional right to, quote, injure their child, and that it poses a greater risk to children, and that the Constitution essentially doesn't give us the right to do that. Regardless of how I or you or others feel, that is the other side providing that argument. And then finally, I just provide some brief policy recommendations looking at multiple levels. So looking at the micro level, looking at working with individual clients and parents, the meso level, looking at engaging the community, getting more resources out there and further understanding about gender affirming care and what it can accomplish. And also now looking at the macro level, looking at cultural differences, respecting these differences, and instilling pride in families and in individuals more at the national level. And then underneath, I have just a closing statement that brings in all these points, reaffirms the ask that I talked about a little earlier. And I feel like this is an issue that should be more suited for parents to decide rather than the state just saying, okay, no one at this age is allowed to receive the care that may actually be beneficial and improve their quality of life. So that's just a brief overview of my policy brief. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me. And that's it. Thank you for listening.
So again, that was Benjamin Seiler, and I know that he had mentioned being open to having his information added to the chat. I don't know if Stephanie, if you can add that in case anyone has any questions, since he's not here to answer. But in the meantime, we're going to move right on to our next presenter. This is Mo Isafiu, another MSW student who will be presenting on extending empathy, ensuring freedom and justice for all Ghanaians.
Hi, Grace. Thank you very much for the introduction. So I won't be turning on my camera, but I hope that, yeah. So what I wanted to achieve with this policy product was to more or less like reach out to allies and advocates in Ghana of the LGBTQ community, because a bill has been passed that will more or less criminalize LGBTQ people and everyone who wants to like advocate or support them. So I wanted to raise awareness about this. People know about this, but like I wanted to reach out to like allies and advocates of the LGBTQ community so that there will be more voices that will speak against the bill. So I want to like tap into the empathy that people have, and like yeah, with that empathy, from the community that can help. So with the problem statement, I was more or less introducing the bill and why it is not good for people. And I also spoke about the fact that the LGBTQ community are already suffering because they can't access healthcare, and people are subjected to corrective rates and other discrimination like employment, housing, and yeah. So to reach into people's hearts and like get them to empathize, I wanted to show them stories that are happening in the country since the bill was passed. And some of them are really heartbreaking. For example, a 15-year-old girl was sexually assaulted by a man who suspected her of being a lesbian. And that is the kind of like corrective rates that are used, and people who are suspected of being lesbians are subjected to that and also denied employment due to their sexuality. And the last point is actually something that made the news, because this woman wasn't, she went through the process of becoming a lawyer. She passed her exams, but she wasn't admitted into the bar because they said she wasn't a good representation of the profession in Ghana, which is sad. And I also wanted to like raise the point that discrimination affects all of us, because LGBTQ people are not different from your average Ghanaian. They're also Ghanaian, but a part of their identity is being singled out and used as and used to oppress or like oppress government. So I wanted to point out the fact that the bill limits our freedom of speech, which makes it difficult for you as an advocate or as an ally to speak out. And that is something that can affect you. And if a family member or friend of yours came out as LGBTQ, they are subject to the punishment that the law has. And if that happens to them, you can't advocate or support them. So it may be very close to your home and there's nothing you can do about it if the bill is passed. And so talking about what we can do, I wanted to create a model that is easy to remember, but can also like reach out to people, which is a speak up model, which is to start with yourself and recognize your positionality about LGBTQ issues in Ghana. And then once you understand how you may contribute to this oppression and how you can like help to advocate or fight against this, then we can start to promote empathy and understanding when we discuss LGBTQ issues related to Ghanaians, and encourage a culture of tolerance in public and private spaces. We advocate, we ally, and we address discrimination wherever we find it, and we keep creating inclusive and safe spaces for LGBTQ people and allies, and to uplift LGBTQ voices, elevate their perspectives, and highlight their achievements to dissuade and fight against the stereotypes about them, and to preserve and continue the struggle for change, because it won't be a 1 day or 2 day issue. It's a continuous struggle that we shouldn't like never stop fighting for. And so finally, using the speak up model, I want people to make their voices heard, so that the current narrative that it's threats to Ghanaian culture or whatever is fought with not only LGBTQ voices, but ally voices too, so that we can create a unified community that can stand against the oppression. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mo. Our next presenter is going to be Sam Battaglia, who's an MSW MPH dual degree student, and she will be presenting her policy brief on real education and access for healthy youth.
All right. Hi, everyone. Can you see my screen? Yeah. Okay. All right. I also want to say something really quick. Grace, we have a couple other people that signed up kind of last minute. So we've got like 3 more that we'll do at the end. And I'll message you after this. Okay, so for my policy presentation, I did it on the Real Education and Access for Healthy Youth Act of 2023. This bill has been trying to be passed in various forms for the past like 20 years, but it was recently reintroduced this year. So what this act would do is it seeks to rectify basically sex education in the United States, and they are calling for comprehensive sex education. So comprehensive sex education is a little different than standard, or what a lot of us have probably received. Comprehensive sex education includes like relationship safety, consent, STIs, contraceptives. It's like more of a whole package, gender identity, pronouns, basically giving youth the entire picture and all of the information that they need to make responsible choices. And we'll get kind of more into that. So if we pass REHY, it'll lead this is kind of like motivational figures along the side to like catch the eye of policymakers if you were actually lobbying. But if you were to pass this, it would hopefully lead to a decrease in STIs, decrease in unplanned and teen pregnancies, and as I'll get into, a decreased financial burden on taxpayers and the healthcare system in general. This last one I added as kind of like Benny was saying in his original presentation, something to kind of pull in the right wing and the right side, because as we know, sex ed and like reproductive rights are not on the top of the agenda for some of our right-wing friends, but financial burden and burden on taxpayers in general definitely is. So some context and importance of the problem. So the CDC approximated that 1 in 5 Americans had an STI on any given day in 2018, totaling nearly 68 million infections in 2018. And there's some more statistics if you care to read some of those, but about like different STIs. Starting on the left side, along with this, adolescents were the highest population that suffered from STIs in 2018. They only make up 13% of our entire population, so of the United States, but they accounted for half of the STIs in the United States. So again, going back to that number, we had 68 million infections in 2018. Half of those were adolescents. Adolescents are aged 15 to 24. So definitely our youth, middle school, high school ages are really being targeted or being affected. Continuing, so with interventions of comprehensive sex education, we would lower that rate for our adolescents, especially by starting education in middle school. Some people want to do it in elementary school, but if we start it earlier, we'll see this chain of events where that number will decrease because it's completely disproportional. For 13% of the population to account for 50% of the reported infections is obviously disproportional. Let's see, continuing on. So I kind of went into the difference between comprehensive sex education and what we have currently. So at the moment, 29 states mandate sex education in general, like any kind, only 29. 16 states endorse abstinence-only instruction. Research shows that abstinence programs set youth up for failure because it basically limits their access to, obviously it limits their access to information, therefore setting them up to make decisions less informed. When you give students the information to make decisions, they actually do choose to make safer decisions because they have access, they understand the whole picture. Let's see. Furthermore, only 19 states require education on condoms and contraception. 13 states lack specific requirements on sexual health education. And 13 of these states don't require the education to be age appropriate, medically accurate, or evidence-based. So they have these things written into their laws that they don't have to be these things, which makes you wonder, what are we teaching? So along with this bill, I proposed a provision to add condom distribution programs. So what this would look like is these schools that get the funding, get the curriculum, get the training services from the bill would also get like a stipend or a certain amount of funding to then provide condoms in these schools. The reason why I want to add these is to increase our accessibility. So if students are getting the information, that's great, but do they have access to contraceptives? If we tell them you should be doing this, you should be doing that, but they don't have access, we're not really meeting them with the whole picture or giving them what they need. So this would eliminate potential financial or transportation barriers for youth in accessing these things. And you can see on the right side, condoms are 98% effective in preventing unplanned pregnancy and stopping transmission of STIs. Again, if we decrease the STI rates and decrease pregnancy rates, we can empower youth with their decisions, and then that will then lead to a decrease in taxpayer dollars and healthcare burden. We're going to go back to the left side because I skipped over this, but with these interventions, it's estimated that we would save about $25.3 billion of taxpayer dollars that would return to our pockets. How I got this number, research from pre-COVID 2019 shows that STIs in the US cost about $15.9 billion to the United States healthcare system. And then along with this, teen birth rates and unplanned pregnancies cost about 9.4 billion total for the US. So combining those together, it would be a net saving of 25.3 if we could eliminate or decrease some of those things. Continuing, so just impacts on individuals, communities, and our nation. Holistically, you're just looking at youth and individuals that can make more empowered, educated decisions. You are removing some of the barriers they have to health literacy and health access by giving them this information. If they were to add the condom distribution programs to the bill, which with our current state of politics, this is probably not going to pass, and they definitely probably wouldn't add a condom distribution program. But in an ideal world, if they did, you would see these youth and these people having greater access to education, entering the job force, decreasing that taxpayer burden, money going back into healthcare system. So kind of like a ripple effect of positives. Yeah, and then my concluding remarks are basically make the decision to empower our country's youth, advocate for the passage, and basically invest in our health and our nation. Thank you.
Sam. Right, our next presenter is Melissa Etlinger, who's an MSW student, and she will be presenting her op-ed on unveiling the profit potential, why diversity and inclusion are non-negotiables in today's corporate landscape.
Hello, can you see my slide? Okay, great. My name is Melissa. My pronouns are she, her. Thank you for being here. I will talk about my op-ed, and I will explore the importance of diversity and inclusion in the corporate world, highlighting the numerous advantages of having a diverse workforce. As the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to invalidate affirmative action in college admissions sparks controversy, I aim to emphasize the urgent need for companies to adopt alternative policies to maintain crucial levels of racial diversity. The question surrounding affirmative action in higher ed has sparked this controversy, but has also made it clear that higher education and companies must urgently adopt alternative policies to maintain the crucial levels of racial diversity once achieved through race-based affirmative action. Having a diverse workforce has numerous advantages, and diversity in undergraduate programs is a vital step towards building a pipeline for such a workforce and reaping those benefits. A diverse workforce brings a wide range of perspectives, skills, and experiences to the table, which otherwise wouldn't be there, which leads to more innovative solutions and better decision-making. It can also help companies better understand and serve a diverse customer base and can improve employee morale and retention. Diversity in undergraduate programs is a crucial step towards building a pipeline for a diverse workforce. It exposes students to diverse cultures and perspectives, preparing them for the realities of the modern workplace and helping them develop the skills needed to thrive in a global economy. With the Supreme Court's decision to invalidate affirmative action in college admissions, higher ed and companies have to find alternative ways. This will require careful planning, collaboration, and sustained effort. I'm going to outline a comprehensive step-by-step approach to address the crucial challenge toward a more inclusive and equitable future for organizations. This begins with the comprehensive assessment and analysis phase. We begin that with doing a deep dive into current policies, practices, and outcomes regarding their DEI racial equity programs. Data is gathered on demographics, employee experiences, hiring rates, pay equity, and other relevant metrics to identify both strengths and areas in need of improvement. Following the assessment, we can strengthen our commitment to equity by engaging with a diverse array of stakeholders, including employees, community members, customers, and advocacy groups. And through open dialogue and collaboration, we can seek input and perspectives on DEI and racial equity issues, ensuring that our policies are rooted in the real needs and experiences of those they affect. Next up is the policy development. We're crafting evidence-informed policies and initiatives to advance that social and economic justice and racial equity within the organization. These policies address systemic barriers, promoting fair treatment and opportunities, and foster a truly inclusive culture. And to support these efforts, we must provide comprehensive training and education to employees at all levels. We're raising awareness, building skills for inclusive leadership, and promoting a culture of belonging and respect to empower our workforce to enact meaningful change. The plans will be carefully laid out in an implementation planning stage where we outline specific actions, timelines, responsibilities, and resources. And we're also assigning accountability and establishing mechanisms for monitoring progress and addressing any challenges. The evaluation and monitoring will be ongoing processes as we establish metrics to evaluate criteria to assess that impact for our initiatives. Regular reviews and adjustments ensure that corporations stay on track toward their goals of social and economic justice. And really at the heart of the approach lies that steadfast commitment to continuous improvement. You know, we pledge to actively seek everyone's feedback, conducting regular reviews, and just staying really informed on emerging research and best practices. And this commitment is not just a promise, but a testament to our dedication to strengthening and refining the policies over time, ensuring that we're always striving for the best possible outcomes. And none of this could be possible without leadership commitment. And as leaders here today, we must demonstrate visible and sustained dedication to advancing the social and economic justice and racial equity. And by championing these efforts and allocating resources and holding ourselves accountable, we can create meaningful and lasting change within organizations and beyond. And together we work towards a future where everyone has an equal opportunity to thrive. As for the when, it's crucial to start this as soon as possible. The need for action is immediate, as the Supreme Court's decision to invalidate affirmative action has created a pressing challenge that must be addressed with a sense of urgency. Implementing evidence-based policies takes time, it takes effort, but the sooner the organizations can begin the process, the sooner they can start making meaningful progress towards achieving social and economic justice and racial equity goals. And delaying action only perpetuates inequities and undermines organizational effectiveness and reputation. Thank you.
I wasn't unmuted. Thank you. Great. Our next presenter is going to be Mahima Silapla. She's an MPH student, and she will be presenting on the tragic price of e-waste and how to not pay.
I thank you. Sorry, I just need about 10 seconds. I'm running into a bit of tech difficulty.
No worries. We can also move to the next person and come back if you want a minute to figure out your presentation.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. That would be great. I was just
Yeah.
gonna.
No worries. Let's move on to our next presenter. It's going to be Caroline Delheim. She's an MSW MSP dual degree student, and she will be presenting on her op-ed titled "Shelter Diversion is the Key to Ending Homelessness."
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. All right, so my apologies. I do not have a very beautiful slideshow about my op-ed. I just have the op-ed itself. So I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen and I will kind of talk through some of the key points. Just going to hit share. All right. Can everyone see that okay? Also, you don't have to be reading it word for word since I'm going to talk about it, so it's probably all right either way. So I guess just like a little bit of context, I'm working right now at House Everyone St. Louis, which is an organization, a very new organization in St. Louis that's working on sort of a more strategic and structural approach to mitigating homelessness in the St. Louis area. And so that kind of led me to this topic. It's not one that I was super familiar with before, which is kind of why I decided to write this op-ed, a little bit about like my thought process from knowing really nothing about this sector to having learned a little bit more and taking out that more structural approach. So I guess I will start out by just sharing that diversion is, or shelter diversion more specifically, is an approach to ending homelessness that really centers the client and aims to help a person find an alternative housing arrangement to shelter. So it's really all about finding alternatives when possible, coming up with creative solutions, and thinking more in the long term without completely disregarding those immediate urgent needs of folks who are facing homelessness like in the moment. So diversion is a program that has been used in cities across the country. It's had a lot of success. However, it's also facing quite a bit of pushback, I would say, in the St. Louis community, and I think in a number of other communities across the country as well. So just to kind of give you a little bit more detail about what diversion is kind of in practice, the National Alliance to End Homelessness views diversion kind of as a three-step process. So the first step is understanding the cause of an individual's housing crisis. The second one is exploring immediate solutions. And the third is helping that person pursue those solutions. So oftentimes when a person is facing homelessness, they will approach a shelter and say, I need a bed tonight. I don't have anywhere to stay. And instead of just saying like, okay, let's find you a bed in a shelter for tonight and then go through that same problem and that issue like the next day and the next day until the person is hopefully on path to permanent housing. Diversion is basically saying, okay, what's the whole picture here? Kind of taking that social work approach and seeing the person in their environment, seeing what other options are available aside from shelter, because shelter has a lot of flaws. Shelter is a system that we need because obviously there are folks who are unhoused and need a bed in the moment, and there may not be alternatives for every person in every option and every opportunity. But it's really an option to kind of seek more creative solutions and avoid some of the really serious dangers and challenges that are associated with homeless shelters. So as I was learning about this and kind of like what the shelter framework looks like, I did some research on like folks who have faced homelessness, folks who have been in shelters, folks who have avoided shelters and chosen to live on the streets as opposed to seeking a shelter environment, even when it was presented to them. And a lot of that, I think, wasn't something I was familiar with when I came into this practicum role. And so I talked a little bit about the fact that shelters are often unsafe, that folks have their belongings taken from them, that they may not be able to keep their pets, that there are a lot of sanitary issues in shelters like body lice and bed bugs and a whole host of other things that for folks who have mental health issues, which is often the case, not always, of course, but does have a lot of overlap with the unhoused population. This is really not an environment that they feel safe and comfortable in, given how crowded and how sort of often like unholistic this process can be. Shelters don't always provide the sort of necessary wraparound services that a lot of these folks need. It's not just about having a bed in that night, but also about having support for mental health care, support for their children, support for seeking other types of health care, or support with financial literacy or seeking employment. There are often a lot of rigid rules at shelters to do with making sure that folks have a bed each night. It's not often a place that you can stay in the long term. And so for someone who's trying to maintain their employment status and work during the normal business hours, that becomes a huge challenge when they're no longer able to stay at work until 5 because they actually have to line up for the get a bed at the shelter each night at 4:30 when it opens at 7 p.m. So I kind of went through some of those pieces of like why shelter is not really the best option and why we need to think about maintaining these sort of like urgent, immediate need options like shelter, but not to the detriment of our long-term sort of solutions. And so that's kind of the crux of my point here, that diversion is an opportunity to think more in the long term, to find solutions that will actually end up with people housed permanently. So there have been a lot of different cities that have used this program and have had a lot of success. In Cincinnati, Ohio, 87% of households that were in this diversion program ended up exiting the program to positive housing outcomes just in 2023. And then another example that was, I think, really impressive was that in Hartford, Connecticut, they had 18,000 people diverted in their program from 2015 to 2019. And only 244 ended up in shelters after that between 2016 and 2019. So that's just a rate of 1.36%. So the success rates are really huge. Obviously, I think my title might be a little dramatic, but I'm trying to draw people in. I think I want to just point out that it's not the only option here, that diversion is not going to like immediately single-handedly solve homelessness, but that it's really important to implement policies at the local and state level that include programs like diversion to fund them, so that we are thinking more structurally and taking sort of a holistic approach to what ending homelessness really means, as opposed to focusing just on that immediate need and not seeing the bigger picture here. So yeah, that's the general gist of it. And I didn't want to read through word for word, but hopefully that that covered it. Yeah.
Thanks, Caroline. Mahimar, did you feel ready?
Yep, I should be good to go. There were some permissions issues that randomly came up, but yeah, I'm gonna try to share my screen now.
Great, take it away.
Okay, is my screen visible? All right. So my policy product is titled "The Tragic Price of E-Waste and How Not to Pay." Essentially, the purpose of doing this is because we are in a world that is rapidly experiencing an exponential proliferation of electronic products. We have been, technically kind of seeing that for the first time in human history, properly, I would say, since the early 1900s or so. But just a little bit of tidbit history is that it was really from the 1970s that developed countries, governments realized that we really needed robust legislation around electronic products and electronic waste because it happened to be accumulating. But surprisingly, several decades on, we have legislation, but it's not satisfactory. So that's kind of what contextualizes the need for this policy brief in the first place. So what is e-waste? Electronic materials that are essentially disposed at the end of their life cycle. So literally think of everything from the phone in your hand to the computer that we're using to have this Zoom call, all the way to refrigerators, ACs, any kind of product that employs a cord or a battery. It's just the category is huge. So you can imagine that because of how many products come into the electronic category, it is one of the fastest growing global global waste streams, occupying over 50 million metric tons just in 2019, and projected to hit even more by 2030, around 75 million metric tons. But alas, out of all of this e-waste, only about hovering around 20% of it is recycled, with over 80% reaching landfills, which is a crazy amount. And this is often, these are often found in developing countries, which are not equipped to collect, treat, and handle the exponential e-waste influx that is only promising to grow. So my policy briefs are targeted at the US federal government. And these recommendations kind of focus on what the US can do as the second largest exporter of global e-waste, and what it can do specifically with respect to its export policies and all of the policies that don't address the human health, ecological, and economic impacts of unmanaged e-waste. So why is e-waste a concern at all? There's three main reasons that I was able to put together. Firstly, it's a major human health hazard. With the World Health Organization classifying it as a hazardous waste with that produces over 1,000 toxic chemicals, such as chlorofluorocarbons, mercury, brominated flame retardants, and hydrochlorofluorocarbons, which are well-known and well-studied toxicants that they're highly correlated with the disruption of the central nervous and immune systems, which can impact in utero and at all stages of development. They can lead to epigenetic issues and cause all kinds of cancers, respiratory damage, and many other issues. So here, it's really the low-income laborers that are employed through these informal e-waste operations that don't have adequate protective provisions who are at the highest risk for exposure. Secondly, ecological damage. For sure, these chemicals that I mentioned before and the incineration byproducts all accumulate into soil, air, and water, and especially because they're largely non-biodegradable. So the valuable materials retrieval process that collectors and landfill processors in developing countries use, like open air burning or acid baths, regularly release toxic fumes into the environment. So many research studies were done in these developing countries, specifically in my home country of India, and places that were found to be processing high volumes of e-waste were found to have 150 times more lead and 710 times more mercury than control samples in the soil and water surrounding those landfilled areas. So clearly, these materials not only infiltrate all parts of our valuable natural resources, but they also take forever to decompose, such as the plastics that could take over 1 million years. And other e-metals also take at least 500 years at times. So there's a large ecologically detrimental footprint that needs to be addressed with e-waste. Finally, the economic waste is actually something that is not as talked about, but really, I believe, is the key to incentivizing recycling in the first place, especially at the corporate level. There are so many precious materials like gold, silver, platinum, copper, and other rare earth metals that remain disposed essentially when these e-waste products are just thrown away. So essentially what we're missing out on is vast amounts, like almost over $62 billion US annually of precious materials and precious resources that could be quote unquote urban mined, which could be put back into the supply chain system so that we're not just mining from natural resources and then just eventually just disposing of them and they're just laying wasted and untapped. So these are the three kind of main impacts of e-waste that could be addressed. But my policy recommendations essentially center around addressing the human health aspect of it foremost. So I would first say that we need to restrict international exports until developing countries are able to be supported with the kind of infrastructure that's necessary to process this e-waste and even recycle it and send it back, or put it back into their own manufacturing supply chains, so that we're not just throwing all of these precious resources away. And we're not putting disadvantaged populations at further risk, especially those human health risks, by exposing them to these e-waste chemicals, but also rendering them very vulnerable to those processing procedures, I would say. Secondly, would be to incentivize sustainable manufacturing. Think modularity. Think, again, the materials recycling, obviously. But one of the main things that recent industry leaders have been talking about is, for example, if you have an iPhone and you go and purchase a certain version, and then a year later they release a phone with only really marginal improvements, like there's only the camera has been improved. What industry leaders are trying to say is, instead of creating a whole new version of a phone, why don't you just create a modular phone design so that just replace the camera, not the entire phone? This is a good way to keep incentivizing innovation in electronics, but also, as a byproduct, prevent unnecessary disposal and unnecessary mining of precious natural resources that could otherwise be put back into the supply chain. Thirdly is to engage consumer awareness. So if the first two are harder to implement, the onus could be put on the consumers themselves, spreading awareness campaigns on how to recycle your electronic products, because I think that is the first step. Often we don't have access to that information. Secondly, how we can reuse or repair our own electronic products, and how we can incentivize consumers to repair instead of replace. And finally, by doing so, we encourage a circular economy, and we incentivize innovation, and we also hold on to these products longer. So it gives time to these industry players to sort out their recycling issues. So those are my recommendations, and that is my policy brief overall. Thank you for listening.
Mahima. I want to make a quick note here that I'm noting the time. We're running significantly over schedule, so we will not have time for formal Q&A. So any presenters who want to receive questions or are open to that, you're welcome to leave your contact information in the chat. But we're going to move to our next presenter. It's Shravya Alina, MPH student, and she is going to be presenting her infographic called A Nation Outgunned, Office of Gun Violence.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. Is my screen visible? All right. Yeah, so my topic is about gun violence, and I believe as an international student, understanding gun culture in the United States is important for my personal safety, social, and academic experiences in the USA, and hence I decided to present on this crucial topic. Um, so so my title is actually says that the nation outgunned uh, with gun violence. So why did I say that? It's because, as you can see, the population of United States as per 2020 statistics is 332 million people, but then the guns are a huge number. They are around 393 million guns, indicating that it's a huge devastating public health concern. And guns always remain the leading cause of death for children and teens in the United States. Very sadly, around 327 Americans are shot every day, and for children and adolescents under age 17, almost 23 kids and children are being shot every day, which means that around more than 100 Americans are being killed in the United States due to gun violence. And United States and the gun violence rate in United States is more than 25 times than other high-income countries such as Canada, Finland, Austria, and so on. Um, and I believe it is important to address this major conception that mental illness is a significant risk factor for gun violence when it is actually not. Because as per estimates, it is said that if 96% of the common violence that occurs would continue, even if risk of mental illness was eliminated. And in the USA, around 44% of Americans have at least one gun in their household, which is 72% of them either utilize handgun or pistol, and 62% own a rifle, whereas 54% own a shotgun. And talking about the health consequences, um, gun violence, the human cost of this crisis is immeasurable because it has a significant health consequences among children, adolescents, survivors, and families. And so, since I currently live in Missouri, I got a bit curious and searched statistics on Missouri, and to to my to my surprise, I found that the state of Missouri stands fourth for gun-related death rates in the USA. And as per recent statistics released in 2024 for gun law strength, Missouri has a tragic score of 9 out of 100 for gun regarding gun law strength. Um, And so far, one of the most significant gun safety legislations is the Bipartisan Safer Community Acts, which addresses only 2 points. Like, it says that the individuals less than 21 are prohibited from purchasing firearms, and there is authority to prosecute firearm traffickers. While this legislation makes significant effort, it is clear that our current policies do not often acknowledge the root causes of the problem. So hence I come up in support with the new Senate bill that was introduced by Senator Murphy Christopher on March 3rd, 2023. While this bill proposes the establishment of Office of Gun Violence Prevention under the Department of Justice. Um, it it also majorly it addresses appointing a director and a board of advisory council under the same department. Now, why is this bill so important? Because it provides a framework for coordinated federal action. It talks about research and resources in a bold effort to create an all governmental to address this urgent public health crisis as a national priority. Most importantly, this bill focuses on bringing together those most impacted by gun violence, let it be families or the victims or the survivors or the veterans, with leaders across federal agencies. And also it addresses it addresses the importance of gun violence prevention research and strategies for expanding local and state outreach programs through education and awareness on federal laws, regulations among the public health regarding ownership of firearms. I believe this is missing amongst the people. um, uh, like majority of them are not really aware about the laws and the regulations regarding uh, the ownership of firearms. And um, so yeah, and there are a few organizations which are in support of this, like the March for Lives, Communities Justice Action Fund, Newton Action Alliance, and and yeah. So I believe that this is also very important because these are the recent statistics in 2021 where it shows the American support for reforming gun laws, and as you can see, 89% of them want a universal background checks, and 66% favor federal tracking of gun sales because it is extremely easy to purchase guns through online sales, which is a kind of a big loophole in the current existing uh, policies. So yeah, I prefer that this bill has to come into act, and I believe it is our responsibility to stay informed, advocate for change, and work towards a future where gun violence no longer is a threat to our society. So yeah, this is my bill about, and this is my policy product. Thank you.
Thanks, Rabia. All right.
Yeah. Stop share. Okay.
Grace Nelson, if you think that you can do it in about 4 minutes, we have time for one more presenter. You feel good?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, cool. Grace is going to be presenting Realizing the Vision Zero plan, and she's an MPH student.
Hi everyone. My name is Grace Nelson. I'm an MPH second year student, and I'll be talking about the Vision Zero plan and how this plan can help cities reduce car crash injuries and fatalities. So overall, traffic incidents are rising, especially post COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021 in the US, we had 25,598 motor vehicle fatalities, and many thousands more were injured. And in 2022, the statistic was over 7,500 pedestrians were killed while walking or biking by car drivers. And our rate of fatalities really hasn't improved over the last 10 years. And we also have one of the highest rates, 2.3 times higher than most other high income countries. And so this is creating a large burden on our communities, both the impacts of people being injured or dying from crashes, as well as it's very expensive to treat these injuries, and the lost workplace productivity is totaling billions of dollars at this point. So a growing effort to fix this is the Vision Zero strategy, and this is a now worldwide strategy that aims to change the systemic structure of traffic policy and to bring about zero crash fatalities, as it's so-called named. It started in Sweden, and it gained a lot of momentum throughout Europe, and now is kind of being put in place in the US and elsewhere. So the main principles behind Vision Zero is that people will make errors while they're driving, but as a result, we need to design our roadway systems so that those inevitable mistakes do not result in injuries. And kind of the process of our roadway design needs to be more interdisciplinary between kind of what we know about our communities, the technology we have, and then our traffic policies to create solutions that will allow for safe mobility for everyone. And so seen here is a diagram from the Vision Zero network and kind of shows how those three things between individuals and kind of our road design and our policy can all interplay. And so these policies and principles move away from the idea that a crash is kind of an individual focused like accident, and more on how we can systematically redesign our roadways. And so there's a lot of components of Vision Zero plans, but overall this work doesn't focus on one singular policy change, but Vision Zero plans are really focused on changing the entire way that traffic policies are viewed and developed. And so this page just shows kind of the overview, some quick points on studies and areas related to the outcomes of Vision Zero. So in New York, they found that over a 9-year trend analysis that after implementing Vision Zero, there was a decline in fatalities among motorists and pedestrians. In Chicago, afterwards, they after the implementation, they found that they were able to reduce the odds of traffic crashes, turning crashes, and rear-ending crashes. And in Seattle, they found that these policies and implementations did not result in any economic impacts to the businesses when this occurs, because that is a concern a lot of time when you start doing large scale traffic projects. And in Missouri, Columbia is the only city that's put forth a Vision Zero policy. However, groups like the Missouri Bicycle and Pedestrian Foundation and other organizations are trying to bring in those efforts to places like St. Louis. And so members of regional planning, health organizations, neighborhood associations, and basically anyone, including us in our community, can take efforts to see how these policies can be implemented and work to promote safer roadways.
Thanks, Grace.
Thank you, Grace. And thanks to everybody that joined us here today. We have a couple of presenters left. So if folks need to get onto their next commitment or go to class, thank you all for being here. We're going to continue our last couple of presenters, and we'll share that on the recording and on our YouTube live stream. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Hannah for a quick presentation. And then I think we'll have one or two more after that and wrap it up. But thank you all for being here and joining us today.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to do this quickly because I also have class, but I did want to share what I've. Okay. Um, I did a policy brief on LITAC, which is the federal government's really main and some say only tool for developing affordable housing. This costs them $13.5 billion annually. And since 1987, it's resulted in the construction and the rehabilitation of but it's really our only tool, and it's really expensive and very complicated for developers to apply for, receive these credits. And then they have to, instead of just using money, they have to sell credits to investors to get cash to fund development. So what happens is that it's a really, really long, complicated process that makes developing these affordable units so much more expensive than it really would need to be through other methods of funding. And then in addition, the equity and the profits that come from the projects generally only benefit the investors. The low income renters, many are still rent burdened, meaning they pay more than 30% of their income in rent. And they are technically the beneficiaries of the program, but they don't really get any long-term gains from the process. So there's a lot of challenges with LITAC. It's a really great program and has helped to create a lot of really amazing affordable housing in the US, but there's also quite a few challenges. Part of it is just the cost and time that it takes to develop because the process is so complicated. It usually takes about 2 times as long to develop a LITAC unit as it would for a market rate unit. And due to all of the legal costs and how many different entities have to be involved, only about 25 cents of every dollar for LITAC actually goes to the development of units. So we see a lot of that money is going into other people's pockets rather than to the renters that are meant to be benefiting from this program. There's some other challenges, which is that it doesn't make these units permanently affordable. And usually investors pull out their equity after 15 years, which is the federal compliance period. And then some critique it and say that it, due to the way that the credits are allocated, it concentrates poverty in places that would otherwise be less expensive to build in. So where some people will say that it's promoting racial and economic, and then many of the LITAC tenants continue to be rent burdened. You can see here they're extremely low income, very low income, and almost 40% still have to receive some kind of rental assistance from another source. So my recommendation isn't really a specific plan, but I think that we need to fund and look at ways to help low-income people become homeowners so that they can also build equity and help develop their communities. We know that homeowners are more interested in their communities and are better able to build wealth than people that are paying rent monthly. And there's a few and there hasn't been a ton of success, but there's a lot of opportunity there. LITAC, I think, has done a lot for us, but since it's our own tool and it's a very specific tool, there's gaps in what we're able to achieve with it. So I think an opportunity for expansion and moving in a different direction with LITAC for affordable housing solutions and help income people become homeowners, groups and communities, help develop those communities, and then really change the landscape of our American cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, for sharing. And next we have Oreolua Ogini. If you would like to get started.
All right, and just share my screen.
Yep.
Can you see it?
Yes, we can see your screen now. If you want to open your presentation PDF,
Yeah,
you can see that
I
yet.
just did. Can you see now?
Yep.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My presentation is Promoting Fiscal Activity for All Americans Act, and this is a bill that has been passed to law and is still it's still at the introduction page. So why am I interested in this bill? So there has been a problem among Americans, and we discovered that less below half percentage of the youth, that's 24.2%, met the 2008 fiscal activity guideline. And what's fiscal activity guideline? It is suggested that every adult from 18 above should engage in physical activity for at least an hour a day, which is equivalent to 300 minutes per week for 5 days. But we discovered that most people don't do that, and which is prone to a lot of factors. So because of that, that led to obesity, that led to so many obesity, depression, suicidal attempts, and which has affected the American population as a whole. 28% of adults age 50 are inactive, and which are led to chronic diseases. And also, if you look at the diversity involved, non-Hispanic Asians are inactive, Black Americans, Indians, and also inactive. So it shows that physical activity should be taken into cognizance. So why this new policy? So this new policy is to bring about the policy gaps and to ensure that it will bring about comprehensive strategies to promote physical activity, and also it will boost funding for community programs and recreational activity facilities. So I discovered that when I came to St. Louis, I don't know where the area I am, I didn't really see a lot of recreational activities, facilities, unless you have to go to WashU to work out. I believe that this thing will help and also encourage people to work out when they see the neighborhood, they have all those small gym just for them to work out, and people come in. Although people come out, but I believe those recreational facilities will help a lot in encouraging physical activity and health and wellness. Then also prioritize school physical education and foster collaboration for healthy living. My colleagues in education, I discovered that whenever they go for what is practicum, or well, it's not practicum, but whenever they go for their own internship in schools, they discover that PE is not even prioritized. And that's where kids have the time to engage in physical activity. So they informed me that PE is just done maybe once a week, and that once a week is just a duration of 30 minutes. So if a child, even that duration of 30 minutes, does not have that privilege to be engaged, how much more at home when the parents are tired, will that parent take that child out? So I believe this policy will help to accommodate a robust physical education curriculum and encourage children and also the adults into physical education and physical activity. All right, let me go to the next one. So what are my policy recommendations? So the policy recommendation for this act is to ensure that there will be access to facilities in the non-reserved area. So this is not only to only urban areas. So we're looking at this policy that will cut across the United States and also launch educational campaigns to encourage physical benefits, partner with local entities. So we are looking, the policies are looking at local entities that will be doing this and how they can partner with them and also fund them locally. And we have organizations that in support American Physical Therapy Association. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have our last presenter for today, Ram Singh.
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen. I can hear my own voice.
We can hear you great. I can.
Okay. So hi everyone. I will be presenting on child obesity. This is my policy product. So basically, I've written a policy brief on exploring few of the pre-existing policies and how to accommodate it or how to grow it more to cover a broader area. So childhood obesity is not just a national issue, it is a global crisis. The World Health Organization highlights that annually obesity is linked to at least 2.6 million deaths worldwide in the United States alone. The prevalence of obesity among children has increased fivefold since 1970. These children are likely to face diabetes, heart disease, and cancer as they grow into adults. But the most important thing is these diseases are preventable. So there are a few key driving factors for this issue is basically it's due to their unhealthy eating habits and inadequate physical activities. And there is also a huge influence of socioeconomic factors and policies across multiple sectors. So the urgency to intervene early cannot be overstated, described by the World Bank as a ticking time bomb. The extensive implication of childhood obesity on global health are profound and far-reaching. Implementing early intervention can significantly reduce future healthcare burdens and improve the quality of life across population. While considering policy options, we evaluated the effectiveness of imposing a tax on sugar-sweetened beverages. This measure has its benefits in reducing consumption and promoting health via generated revenues. However, it fails to address the multifaceted causes of obesity comprehensively and could adversely affect employment in certain sectors. Thus, I advocate for a more holistic solution, improving physical activity guidelines within public schools. This policy does not only aim to enhance the physical health of children, but also their mental well-being, setting a foundation for lifelong healthy habits. Research supports that regular physical activity significantly mitigates the risk of obesity. Studies by Hills and Devers have shown that physical education in schools can decrease adiposity and improve metabolic health in children, which is a critical factor in combating obesity. The successful implementation of this policy calls for a collaborative effort among several stakeholders. Schools and physical education trainers will be pivotal in reshaping the curriculum. Parents must be engaged as active participants in promoting physical activities at home. Government and educational departments need to provide the necessary support and resources. Uh, Financially, this initiative requires investment in sports facilities and professional development for educators. The benefits, however, will justify the cost. By improving physical activity programs in schools, we expect to see an increase in student participation in the short term and significant health improvements in the long term. For sustainability, it's crucial that these interventions are embraced by the community and supported by continuous government funding. Moving forward, We will develop comprehensive training for teachers and establish robust metrics for evaluating the effectiveness of the implemented policies. In conclusion, the fight against childhood obesity is not just about preventing a health condition. It's about setting up our future generations for a healthier and happier life. By supporting physical education in public schools, we are taking a significant step towards building a healthier America in one child at a time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ram. Thanks to all of our presenters today for sharing your work and the things that you have learned as part of the Graduate Policy Scholars Program. Thanks to all of our attendees for joining us today. We'll be sharing this link out and posting it on our website as well as on our YouTube channel. Leave any questions you have for the students in the chat. We'll be sure to share those with them, and thank you again.